never set out to document old architecture around New Mexico. I stopped and photographed buildings that I reacted to or responded to internally. And if I could get a print that would bring that out, then it was a success. If I couldn't, then it was just another picture of another building. To me, these photographs are all individuals. I know if you look at them at a group, there's a consistency of perspective and tonality and all, but to me, each building is an individual, and I can remember standing there taking the picture of every one of those. After my GI Bill ran out, I got a job driving a produce truck for a greenhouse down in Tomei. And that took me all over the state. And I have to admit, at some point I started cheating on my routes a little bit and getting creative with getting from point A to point B just so I could go through different small towns and take different routes. Paul Strand was one of the photographers who really influenced me. He did a lot of portraiture. In fact, he worked in New Mexico a lot. He said something to the effect that a good portrait leaves the viewer feeling as though they know the subject. They have met them, even though they never have met them. In other words, a portrait is going to say something about that person more than just what they look like. And that's what I'm trying to do with these buildings. I've photographed an awful lot of buildings, and the ones that look back at me are the ones that are meaningful to me. I think these places, as much as anything, reflect the personalities of the people who made them. It's a lot different now with all the building codes. Buildings are starting to take on a similarity that you just lose that kind of character. There's a gas station down in Dexter, Wortman's Super Service, and it was run by John Wortman for a lot of years. I took the photograph in 1977. From what his son says, one day he decided he was going to retire, so he closed up same as always and went home and never went back. Well, back in the mid to late 90s, Bud took me over to that gas station, and we walked around inside, and it was like stepping through a time portal, because nobody had touched anything in that gas station in 20 years. There were still candy bars under the counter and cigarettes in the rack on the wall, fan belts and cans of oil all over the place. It was like a little museum. One particular photograph that I took of some garage doors in a little adobe garage down in Berlin. This young man had painted a bucolic scene on the front of it. It was starting to get kind of weathered. That was Florencio Chavez who painted this. Well, he was a young man that had some mental disabilities. He was hearing impaired. So he painted a lot of buildings around Valencia County. And apparently the family had no record of these. He died when he was 33. The family and I made contact, and of course I was happy to give him copies of the prints because that's the only record they had of his work. And that building now is an auto parts store. I mean, the building is gone. The site is an auto parts store. The Joy Drive-In marquee. I was just driving through Barino, one of my creative routes, in that produce truck, and I saw it. And it's one of those things I called a brake slammer. Just slammed on the brakes, whipped out the camera, grabbed one frame, and drove off. It says to me so much about New Mexico, with the Spanish language films, and just really, it draws me in whenever I look at it. I could almost see all the local Spanish families in their 1930s and 1940s cars driving in there for their weekend treat. In the time when these buildings went up, I think that there was also almost a necessity for people to design their own ways of surviving. There weren't a lot of jobs, so well, let's go open a store and we'll sell some groceries, or we'll sell beer or whatever, and we'll make our money that way. So yeah, there was a definite sense of independence. The people in the small villages, they are a reflection of these places. That's where the villages came from. That is their history. And these places say as much about the people behind them as they do about my response to the buildings.